The Vikings are often remembered as one of the most feared groups in history, warriors who plundered coasts, conquered kingdoms, and sailed into the unknown with unmatched ferocity. From the late 8th century onward, they terrorized Europe, spreading their dominance across the seas. Yet, history reveals a little-known fact. Even the mighty Vikings, men who feared no king or empire, once trembled before a mysterious and forgotten tribe. These people, shrouded in legend and mystery, were so fierce and unpredictable that even the hardened Norse raiders avoided their lands. Their existence challenges the myth of Viking invincibility and sheds light on the darker, lesser-known corners of the ancient world. The myth of the fearless Viking. To understand why this forgotten tribe struck fear into Viking hearts, we must first understand how the Vikings viewed fear itself. Vikings valued bravery above all else. Their culture revolved around strength, honor, and courage in battle. Dying with a sword in hand was considered a glorious path to Valhalla, the Norse afterlife reserved for heroes. Cowardice was the greatest shame. And yet, even these warriors, whose lives were defined by warfare, spoke in whispers of certain lands and peoples they would rather avoid. Some Viking sagas mention the men of the North Woods, the Skin Walkers, and the Forest Spirits. These tales, half myth and half truth, describe encounters with beings who were neither entirely human nor entirely beast. Historians believe many of these stories were inspired by encounters with real tribes whose customs, environment, and fighting skills left a deep impression on Norse raiders. The forgotten tribe in the north. The tribe that terrified the Vikings is believed to have been the Sámi, a nomadic indigenous people who lived in the Arctic regions of Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Sweden, Finland, and parts of Russia. The Sámi were known for their deep connection to nature, shamanistic practices, and their ability to survive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. To the Vikings, the Sámi were both mysterious and powerful. They lived beyond the northernmost borders of the Norse world, in lands of endless snow, freezing winds, and strange lights in the sky, the aurora borealis. Vikings who ventured too far north often returned with stories of men who could command the weather, speak to spirits, and curse their enemies with terrible misfortune. While the Sámi were not warriors in the same sense as the Vikings, their reputation for supernatural power made them formidable. Viking sagas often described them as sorcerers, or witches, who could summon storms or drive men mad. In a world where religion and magic intertwined, this made the Sámi deeply feared. Masters of the frozen world. The Sámi possessed a mastery of their environment that the Vikings could never match. They moved silently through the snow on skis or reindeer sleds, hunting with uncanny precision. To the Vikings, who relied heavily on brute force and open confrontation, this stealth and skill were unnerving. Vikings who raided or traded in the far north often found themselves at a disadvantage. The Sámi knew every hidden valley, frozen river, and mountain pass. They could vanish into the wilderness, strike from the shadows, and disappear again without leaving a trace. Legends tell of Viking expeditions that vanished entirely in the frozen north, never to be seen again. It is likely that some of these disappearances were due to harsh weather or lack of preparation, but Viking survivors often blamed the magic of the Northmen, a clear reference to Sámi sorcery. Shamans and the fear of Seiðr. One of the main reasons the Vikings feared the Sámi was their spiritual power. The Sámi were practitioners of shamanism, using trance, drums, and rituals to communicate with spirits and nature. Their shamans, known as Noaidi, were said to heal the sick, predict the future, and control the elements. Even among the Vikings, certain forms of magic, known as Seiðr, were considered dangerous and taboo. Seiðr involved controlling destiny, summoning spirits, or manipulating minds. Interestingly, the Norse believed that this kind of magic originally came from the Sámi. In their eyes, Sámi shamans had an otherworldly connection that even the gods respected. There are Norse sagas describing Viking warriors who sought out Sámi shamans for help before battles or sea voyages. They would pay them to perform rituals to ensure victory or favorable winds. But these same warriors also feared offending the shamans, believing that a single curse could doom an entire crew. The line between respect and terror was thin. When cultures collided. Despite their fear, the Vikings could not completely avoid the Sámi. The two groups often interacted, sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. Archaeological evidence shows trade between them. The Sámi provided valuable goods such as furs, hides, and reindeer, while the Vikings offered metal tools, weapons, and ornaments. But peace was fragile. When the Vikings tried to conquer Sámi territory or enslave them, the outcome was often disastrous. Viking sagas record several failed expeditions to the far north, where harsh conditions and mysterious curses wiped out entire groups. In one saga, a Viking leader mocked a Sámi shaman and refused to pay him for a ritual. Days later, his ship was caught in a supernatural storm and sank with all hands. Whether these stories were literal or symbolic, they show how the Norse saw the Sámi as both indispensable allies and terrifying enemies. The power of nature and fear. It is easy to see why the Vikings projected such fear onto the Sámi. The north was a place of extremes, bitter cold, endless night, and haunting silence. The aurora dancing across the sky, the howling winds, and the endless snow created an atmosphere of mystery and dread. For the Vikings, who were used to conquering with swords and axes, the Sámi represented a power they could not fight with steel. The tribe's survival in such conditions, their strange rituals, and their apparent mastery over nature itself made them seem more like spirits than men. Even centuries later, Scandinavian folklore preserved this fear. Tales of Finnmen, a term for Sámi sorcerers, persisted into the Middle Ages, describing them as beings who could fly, change shape, or summon sea monsters to sink enemy ships. The psychological edge. What truly terrified the Vikings, however, was not physical strength, it was psychological warfare. The Sámi understood the power of belief. They used ritual, secrecy, and the natural world to instill fear. In a time when every storm or illness could be seen as a divine punishment, the Sámi's reputation for controlling such forces gave them enormous power. A Viking chieftain could face another warrior in open combat without hesitation. But how do you fight someone who can curse your soul, blind your eyes, or summon a blizzard with a drumbeat? The Sámi didn't need armies, they had the power of fear and mystery. Lessons from a forgotten people. Today, the Sámi are recognized as an indigenous people with a rich and enduring culture, no longer the terrifying sorcerers of Viking legend. But their story reminds us that power takes many forms. The Vikings ruled the seas through force, yet they were humbled by those who ruled the land and the spirit. The fear the Vikings felt toward the Sámi was rooted not only in superstition but also in respect. The Sámi represented something the Vikings could not conquer: nature itself. In that frozen world of blizzards and northern lights, brute strength meant little without knowledge and balance. This encounter between two vastly different cultures, one guided by conquest, the other by coexistence, reveals an ancient truth: even the strongest warriors can be brought to their knees by what they do not understand. Conclusion. The legend of the forgotten tribe that terrified the Vikings is more than just a tale of fear, it is a story about the limits of human power. The Vikings, who dominated much of Europe through fire and steel, found themselves powerless before a people who needed neither armies nor castles. The Sámi's strength came from their connection to the land, their knowledge of the unseen world, and their ability to turn fear into protection. In the end, the Vikings' greatest enemy was not a rival empire, but a forgotten tribe hidden in the frozen north, people who proved that true power lies not in conquest, but in understanding the forces that govern the world.